The world's first vaccine was invented by an English country doctor named Edward Jenner, and this is the incredible story behind it. Edward Jenner was born in 1749 in a small village called Berkeley in the English county of Gloucestershire. His father was a farmer, and his mother belonged to a wealthy family who owned a lot of land in the area. When Edward was just a baby, his parents moved to a nearby city and began renting out rooms in their house to students at a prestigious academy. So growing up, Edward spent a lot of time around these young people, and he would listen intently to their conversations about medicine and science. This sparked his interest in becoming a doctor. At age 13, he began working as an apprentice to a surgeon, and at age 16, he was accepted into the prestigious Edinburgh Medical School. After graduating, he traveled throughout Europe for a couple of years, learning from some of the best doctors there. During this time, he developed an interest in a disease known as cowpox. It was a mild illness that affected cows and occasionally humans. However, there seemed to be some connection between the two diseases, which led Edward to start wondering if maybe exposure to cowpox could protect against smallpox. When Edward returned to England in 1778, he took on a position as a country doctor in a village called Berkeley. It was here that he would make his most famous discovery. Now, before we get into how he actually tested his theory, it's important to explain what smallpox was like back then. Smallpox was a horrible disease that killed millions of people each year. It caused high fever, weakness, and then a rash all over the body that turned into painful blisters. Those blisters would then burst and leave scars that would last for life. There was no cure for smallpox, and the only way to avoid getting it was to keep your distance from those who had the disease. But sometimes avoiding it wasn't possible, and even one small step closer could be enough to catch it. In fact, people were so terrified of smallpox that they believed it could be spread by clothing or personal belongings. One day, Edward Jenner heard from one of his patients that milkmaids who contracted cowpox never seemed to get smallpox. He found this very interesting because milkmaids were in regular contact with cows, whereas most other people weren't. So then he started paying close attention to these milkmaids to see if they really were immune to smallpox. He also spoke with many of the older farmers who lived in the area, and they confirmed to him that they had seen countless cases of cowpox in cows, but they had never seen a single case of anyone in the village who had both cowpox and smallpox. This made Jenner wonder if perhaps the cowpox infection was protecting them from smallpox. Jenner began researching old medical texts to find out if anyone else had ever noticed this connection. And while he didn't find any evidence that anyone else had made the connection, he did come across a case study of a woman who had been exposed to smallpox virus but never developed symptoms of the disease. The case study suggested that her immunity was the result of having previously had cowpox, which provided some more evidence to support Jenner's idea that cowpox could protect against smallpox. In May 1796, Edward Jenner decided to test his theory. He visited a young boy named Thomas Dimsdale, who was known to have recently contracted cowpox. With permission from his parents, Jenner took material from the sores on the boy's hands and then rubbed it into a small cut on the arm of a young girl named Sarah Nelms. He then waited to see what would happen. Jenner kept track of everything he observed about Sarah's health after the procedure. Every day he recorded his observations in a journal, along with drawings of how the wound looked. As it turned out, Sarah didn't seem to react to the injection at all, so Jenner became concerned that the procedure hadn't been successful. But 3 weeks later, she began showing signs that she had developed cowpox. She had a fever and felt weak and sore. But after a week, she seemed to recover. Just to be sure that she had not developed smallpox, Jenner continued to monitor her closely for the next few months. In December, he began to feel confident that she had not developed smallpox. So then he gave her a little more of the smallpox virus, just to test his theory further. Once again, he waited anxiously for her to develop symptoms of smallpox, but she never did. Jenner realized that his procedure had worked, and he had just invented a vaccine for smallpox. Word of his invention quickly spread, and soon people from all over the world were coming to him to try and get vaccinated. It's estimated that in the first year alone, he vaccinated over 6,000 people. Of course, at the time, people didn't know why exactly it was working, but that didn't stop them from being grateful for its success. As one London newspaper put it, the hand of death is stayed by the arm of inoculation. It's also worth mentioning that Jenner didn't patent his discovery, which meant that everyone everywhere could use it to help prevent smallpox. This is one of the reasons why he's now considered to be the father of immunology. While Jenner's first method worked great, it was a little bit risky since it involved using material from active sores. Luckily, he continued to experiment and came up with a much safer method. You see, when he first read about the woman who seemed to be immune to smallpox, he wondered if maybe she had acquired immunity through her everyday work, which led him to believe that everyday exposure might offer protection without making someone sick. So then, he thought, could he somehow increase the exposure to cowpox without actually causing illness? To figure this out, he began experimenting with taking fluid from the cowpox blisters, boiling it and then injecting it. While this new method didn't seem to cause illness, it also didn't seem to create immunity. So, he tried combining the two methods, and he injected patients with a mixture of fluid from both smallpox and cowpox sores. This seemed to create immunity without causing illness, and it became his preferred method of vaccination. Basically, he was trying to dilute the virus as much as possible to reduce the risk of someone dying, while still giving them enough to create immunity. This was another big step forward, because it offered a safer alternative to the first method. Now, unfortunately, Jenner didn't have a microscope to look at the virus, so he didn't know exactly what he was dealing with. In fact, it wouldn't be until decades later that Louis Pasteur discovered that vaccines worked by preparing the body for infection. When scientists truly understood how vaccines worked. In the meantime, though, Jenner continued to vaccinate people, and in 1802, he had successfully vaccinated over 100,000 people against smallpox. Vaccines quickly spread around the world, and eventually were credited with eliminating smallpox in the Western Hemisphere. Around the same time, the practice of vaccinating animals began as well. By 1867, the United States was able to stop vaccinating its citizens, and the World Health Organization followed suit in 1966. By this point, the vaccine had saved countless lives, and Jenner was rightly celebrated as a hero. After his incredible discovery, Jenner retired from practicing medicine and dedicated his life to research. He continued to experiment with different methods of vaccination, and also researched other diseases such as syphilis. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to discover a vaccine for any of those diseases, but his work paved the way for future discoveries, and he is remembered as the man who saved millions of lives and helped to eradicate smallpox. After Jenner retired, he began receiving recognition for his discovery. In 1802, he was awarded a special prize by the French National Academy of Medicine for his work, and in 1807, he was knighted by King George III. This made him the first and only country doctor to ever become a knight. In 1828, he was appointed to the Order of Merit, which is the highest honor that can be awarded to a British scientist. In addition, numerous statues and monuments were erected in his honor, and every May, the anniversary of his birth, is celebrated as National Doctors' Day in the United Kingdom. So the next time you hear someone say that someone else is full of it, you can tell them that Edward Jenner was literally full of smallpox virus when he injected it into a girl named Sarah Nelms, and that's why we have vaccines today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Also, make sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date on all of our latest content. Your support helps us make even more great content. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.